Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Bellomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law. I'd like to welcome you to today's show. I'm really excited today to talk a little bit about estate planning and elder law and get a little more into these topics and have a little more fun. On a previous podcast, we talked about the basics. What is estate planning? Who needs it? And what do we need? And we had a couple laughs when people ask me all the time, what do I need? Just tell me, Jeff, without knowing anything about me, without knowing who I am, my personal goals, my health goals, my finance goals, my beliefs, my systems, what I want my kids to accomplish, or what I believe for them. Just tell me what I need. We laughed a little and kind of discussed how that's virtually impossible and how people give me way too much credit if they think that I am able to do that. We had a little fun with a story called The Psychic Story, talking about how most wills are 1 to 2 pages, and I read almost everybody's will to you. And then we had a chuckle about that and how simple it was, but yet how catastrophic it could be based upon the fact that if an individual is underage, or if they're disabled, if they're receiving public benefits by the government, if someone dies untimely, so many things can happen that can make that 1 to 2 page document a catastrophic bomb just ready to go off. So we ended that session talking about, what does a person need? We were talking about the basics of estate planning, power of attorney for finances, power of attorney medical, or a healthcare proxy. We also discussed the basics and the fundamental of a last will and testament, and we touched on what a trust is. So today, I want to finish up that conversation. I want to talk a little bit more about trusts and also about how do we make the decisions of what a person needs. What goes into it? What is making it more complicated these days? So for those of you who have been to one of our in-house workshops, you know that we teach a workshop currently called 3 Lands, the 3 Lands to your family's security. The story behind the 3 Lands is that, about 6-7 years ago, I traveled the country fairly often training estate planning and elder law lawyers. And I was training them, and I was up in front of a room of a couple hundred people. And this one attorney in particular was having a very difficult time sort of understanding the concept that I was trying to teach. And, lawyers are tough, right? Lawyers are tough people to train. They know everything. Just ask them, right? So I had to figure out a way to teach the concept without insulting him or without saying the same things over and over again, because ultimately, I didn't know what else to say, right? The concept was the concept. I thought it seemed pretty straightforward, and I was just not able to kind of get him to understand. So ultimately, on the fly, in front of a room, I came up with something that is called the 3 Lands to your family's security. So this plays so much better live. So you're going to have to kind of bear with me a little bit today, because you're just hearing me speak. And you're just going to have to let your imagination help us with this story. But I think it's pivotal, and I think it's one of the most important stories that we use in our practice. And anyone who has used our law firm to make important decisions in regards to estate planning and elder law will tell you that 90% of the time we will stand up in the office and we will introduce you to the 3 Lands, and we will ultimately make a decision based upon whatever you determine is most important after we discuss the 3 Lands. So the 3 Lands to your family security are in the far left-hand corner of the room. So please visualize for a second that I am standing to the furthest point, if you're looking at me, to the right, or to me, to my left, okay? And I'm waving my hands furiously like a maniac. That is going to be tax land. Taxland. Okay, now I move to the center of the room and I am in long-term care land. And now I'm going to move to my far right or your far left if you're looking at me from the audience. That would be estate planning land. Okay? So we discussed on a previous podcast, what is estate planning? I want to control my property while I'm alive and well. Plan for me and my loved one if I become disabled, right? So we agreed that control was the most important thing in estate planning. So when we start talking further about trusts, we're going to be focused almost exclusively on trusts that allow you to remain in control. We will only reference tax trusts or trusts that make you give up control just from a context perspective, a perspective of letting you know that that isn't what we're going to be doing, okay? So when we're talking about trusts, we're talking about trusts where you can remain in control. Why? Because that's our definition of estate planning. The most important thing is that you remain in control, right? Okay, so that's the far right. Now I'm going to go back to the far left, my far left, your far right, and I'm going to talk to you about tax land. Boy, tax land has gotten very interesting over the last 15, 20 years, okay? Currently, as we sit here today, you are allowed to pass with $12.06 million to your name. And if you're married, your spouse can also die with $12.06 million to his or her name. And there is no tax, no federal estate tax. Now, if you go over that amount of money, the government will tax that wealth at a 40% tax rate. So the reason that I alluded earlier to the fact that we're not going to be talking about tax trusts is why? Because most of my clients don't have that problem. Most of my clients don't have more than 12.06. And certainly if they're married, they don't have another 12.06 that they're concerned about. In fact, I have 0 clients currently as we sit here today that have that problem. In 2025, the federal estate tax limit is set to come back to $5 million plus inflation. So depending on what you read and what articles you're paying attention to, we're generally telling people it's probably going to fall somewhere in the $5.8 million range per person, or husband and wife 11.6. Still a pretty high number. Still, most people in the United States will not have that issue, and specifically most people in Pennsylvania won't have that issue either. Gee, Jeff, isn't it possible that Congress could act and change all of that? Yeah, it's possible. But what I have been saying for the last couple years, and so far, knock on wood, I have been right, is that historically, Congress only acts when they have to. They only pass a tax bill as it relates to estate tax, gift tax, and those types of taxes that we're talking about when they absolutely must, right? And when they have to, and when there's no law in place or the previous law sunsetted, that has always been historically when they've acted. For the first time, our law is set to go forever. So our law is set for inflation. In 2025, it goes back to $5 million plus inflation, and then it's set to go forever. So presumably, we may never see Congress act again in this area. Why? Because there is a law, and we know what it is, and they have a lot more important things to be worried about than typically a federal estate tax. So I don't know that we will. There was a period there for maybe 6 months to 8 months that I thought maybe we would see something, and there were certainly a lot of threats. You heard a lot of things about it coming down to $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, and I kept saying, well, if it's coming back to $5 million, that's stupid because it's coming back to $5 million anyway in 3 years. So that would be a waste of time. So I didn't buy that. And as we know, as we stand here today, in June of 2022, Congress has not acted thus far. Therefore, currently, we are with our law that we have, which is $12.06 million plus $12.06 million if you're married. And then in 2025, it's set to go back to $5 million plus inflation, which we're looking at about $5.8 million is our guess, which will get us about 11.6 million for a husband and wife. So we'll wait and see what happens to kind of see where that goes and if anything comes up. But currently, that's what we have. So that's tax land. Okay. Now, I just got done telling you that I don't have any clients with that kind of wealth. And interestingly, that transfer can occur during life, at death, or a combination of the two. Meaning an individual who has less than 12.06 million can literally give away everything they have. No tax consequence to themselves, no tax consequence to the receiver, and everybody is happy. And in addition to that, there is something called an annual exclusion gift. Okay? Now, the annual exclusion gift is $16,000 a person. Okay? Now, that has gone up from 10 million to 11 million to 1,000, from 10,000 to 12,000 to 15,000. We are currently at $16,000 a person, which means any individual can give away $16,000. That's per giver, per receiver. So I'll give you an example. If you have a husband and wife who have 2 kids who are married, okay? Now let's just name them for the sake of, just being able to use an example. So if you have a mom and dad who have a son named Jeffrey and a daughter named Dina. All right. So what can mom give to Jeff? $16,000. What can mom give to Jeff because he's married to Whitney? $16,000. All right, great. Now, that's $32,000, am I right? Sure. What can mom do for her daughter, Dina, who happens to be married to Matt? The exact same thing. So that's 32 plus 32 is 64. And what can dad, the father, do? The exact same thing, which is another 64. So that's $108,000 a year. That family can give away gift tax free to the giver, to the receiver. No, nothing needs to be filed, nothing needs to be noted, nothing needs to occur. Now, once you go over that $16,000 a year annual exclusion, now you're supposed to file a gift tax return. Well, with it coming back in 2025 to 5 million, you're seeing some people definitely filing those things. But, historically, the conversation has been, if a family only has, a million or 500,000, and you're going to gift something that may go over 16,000, but certainly you're going nowhere near touching the 12.06 million, do you really need to file a gift tax return? I think the technical answer is yes. I think the government would say yes. I think the rules would say yes. So the technical answer is yes. The practical answer is, are you going to pay somebody to file a return that the penalty for not filing is a percentage of the tax owed? Well, one thing I learned in school was that any percentage of zero is always zero, right? So if you're never going to owe it because you only have a million or 500,000, do you do it? Do you spend the money on the return? I'll leave that up to you and to your accountant to decide, but we have not done many tax returns, and many of our accountants that we work with have not recently, nor do I think you're going to see them. Particularly, again, most of the clientele that are doing this type of planning are somewhere in the, 300,000 to 400,000 to maybe 2-3 million, maybe 4 million. When the new law comes in, we still don't have an issue. So that's why we have that conversation. Certainly something good to talk to your accountant and advisor about, and something that we discussed on a regular basis. So that's that. All right. That is essentially tax planning in a nutshell, or tax land in a nutshell. Well, gee, Jeff, I'm trying to figure out what you're laying down here, but essentially we can give everything away, right? Tax-free to the giver, tax-free to the receiver, whether it's 12.06 plus 12.06, or whether it's, the fact that we have this $16,000, at the end of the day, we could give everything away. That's true. Now, what I need you to do is to visualize that I am on a horse, and I am riding the horse to the middle of the room, all right? Now we're in long-term care land. So long-term care land is going to be skilled nursing homes or skilled care in the home, okay? The cost for that type of care in a nursing home, the average in the state of Pennsylvania is $14,000. In the York, Lancaster area, you're probably a little closer to $12,500. And as far as in-home care goes, that's completely dependent on how many hours of care you need and what level of care. But assuming you need skilled care and you need it 24/7, you could be looking in the home anywhere from $21,000 to $23,000 a month. Yes, a month. So that can become extremely cost prohibitive. When we're looking to pay for long-term care, there's a couple ways to pay for it. One, obviously, is out of pocket. Another would be long-term care insurance. And we will definitely spend another podcast talking about long-term care insurance, the pros, the cons, the goods, the bads, the uglies. So we'll keep that in mind as well. Another way to pay for it is the government programs. So there is a program in Pennsylvania called Medicaid, okay? And Medicaid will allow us to have our bill paid for, or at least assistance with that. But you have to be spent down to certain amounts of money. Now, we will definitely dive very deep into Medicaid on a future podcast. But for the sake of today, when we're talking about long-term care land, what I do want to emphasize is that currently in the state of Pennsylvania, if a spouse enters a nursing home, we are able to protect 100% of the assets for the spouse residing at home. And if the person is needing care and they are in the home, under the waiver program, we can also help them as well, as long as their income, and we're going to use a round number for the sake of today's discussion, of, let's call it $2,800. So as long as their income is less than $2,800, we will be able to essentially be able to protect them, get care for them in the home, and protect assets for the spouse. That's wonderful. When we're dealing with a single individual, widow or widowed, who had done no prior planning, they're in a nursing home, we're able to protect 50%. So you're looking at married 100%, single 50%. Well, gee, Jeff, is the government just going to do that for everybody? No, they're not. They're going to look back 5 years. There is a 5-year look back on Medicaid. What are they looking for? They're looking for gifts, right? So now visualize me going back into tax land, okay? In tax land, what is everything that we talked about? All of the things that you're allowed to do, those are gifts. I call gift a 4-letter word, right? Oh, wait a minute. I was allowed to do that. That overweight curly-haired attorney, Jeff, he said that I could give away 12.06 plus 12.06 plus $16,000 a year. I did. I said it. I said it on that podcast. In what land? Tax land. We're not in tax land anymore, Toto. We're in long-term care land. So when we're in long-term care land, the rules are different. And in this land, the rules say in a given month for the past 5 years, you could not have given away in aggregate more than $500. Whoa, but that attorney, that accountant, that lawyer, that said $16,000. That was in tax land. In long-term care land, it's $500 in a month in aggregate, right? So that includes birthday gifts, Christmas, that's everything. You cannot give more than that and still expect the government to help pay for the long-term care. And let's all remember, in tax land, a gift is non-take-a-backable. Okay, one more time for effect. A gift is non-take-a-backable. Now, imagine I'm heading the whole way over to estate planning land. Now I'm in estate planning land. What was the key of estate planning land? Control. I want to control my property. Remember? Yeah, control was the key. If you give it away in tax land, how well do you control it in long-term care land? You don't. Specifically, how well do you control it in estate planning land? You absolutely don't. So the reason that we use this visual of me running around the room from land to land is because it's a lot like physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Estate planning and elder law is the exact same way, right? You can make the best decision in the world in tax land, and it can come back to bite you in long-term care land. Or you can make the most amazing decision in tax land and blow yourself up in estate planning land and lose complete control of everything. All right. Now, we're going to use this concept as a conversation starter. We're going to use it as a way to understand concepts and how the different lands can affect each other, because the answer is going to be different in every land. And ultimately, a client has to decide what is best for them and their family, right? So let's just take a quick example. In tax land, could my father put my name on everything? Sure. In tax land, absolutely, right? Assuming he has less than 12.06 million, he can put my name on everything. But if he puts my name on everything, who owns it? I do, right? I own it. Subject to whose divorce? Mine. Whose nursing home? Mine. Whose car accidents? Mine, right? Now, my father trusts me, right? I hear it all the time. I trust you. Yeah, and I do too. I trust this version of me. But couldn't I die tomorrow? Right? And if I die, where does everything go? Right? To my wife. Okay, so now fast forward 3 years. My dad is living in his house that my wife owns. Is my wife going to be okay with that? Absolutely. Right? No doubt. Fast forward 10 more years. Is my wife's new husband going to be okay with the ex-father-in-law living in the house for free that they own? I don't know. You know, I suppose we could have that discussion, but we'll never know. We'll never find that answer out. But the bottom line is, my father is not in control, right? If I have a stroke and I go into a nursing home, it's now my asset. We have a major problem, right? The list goes on and on and on. So my father said to me at one point, well, I trust you. And my response was, yes, but bad things happen to good people. Because if any of those bad things happen, when you give something or someone outright assets, it's subject to everything. It's subject to the creditors, to the divorces, to the nursing homes. So as a general rule, I am not a fan of outright gifts. I am not a fan of losing control of the assets. And let's not forget, when you give a house to someone, the basis that they receive in it is the basis that you had. So dad paid $20,000 for a house in Pittston, Pennsylvania, right? Let's say it's worth $200,000 today. If he gives it to me, my basis is 20. So if I sell it for 200, what's 200 minus 20? 180, subject to capital gains tax, right? That can be 10, 15, 23.8% from 20,000 to 200. But if my dad transferred it to me upon his death or in a trust that he controlled, yeah, I'm going to pay 4.5% inheritance tax. But I'm going to avoid all that capital gains tax. And all the while, he was in control, which means outside of 5 years, that would not have been an asset that would have been an available resource if he ever ended up needing long-term care. So you look at that and you introduce that concept to somebody and you say, okay, would you be comfortable with that risk? When I can give you a solution that is going to be great in long-term care land, as long as we make it 5 years. And then in estate planning land, it's great as well, because why? We remain in control, right? So you can see from all these examples that control is the key, and we have to take a look at everything from each of the three lands before we can make a final determination. So I hope you had fun today on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show with Jeff Bellomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law. Today's conversation was a little bit about our three lands and what the three lands are. In the next episode, we'll carry on that conversation a little further, and then we're going to talk a little more about trusts, what they are, and how do we use them from a high level. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show.